Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick, and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place that is dedicated to making sure you always have cool places to learn about and explore in the sim so you never run out of things to do in the sim. Today we're out at the Big Island, the one that is actually named Hawaii in the state of Hawaii, and we're flying up to check out the observatories at the tops of the island's two huge volcanoes, along with some neat scenery and other historical spots along the way. We're going to be leaving from Kona International, Papa Hotel Kilo Oscar, on the farthest piece of the coastline to the west of this island anyway, and we'll be landing almost directly east of here on the other side of the island at Hilo International, Papa Hotel Tango Oscar. And as far as add-ons go, the only one I've got installed today is for the telescopes on top of Mauna Kea, and they look awesome, and they're free. So you'll definitely want to drop that. It's just one folder, but pick that up for your community folder if you're going to take this flight, because it's going to be a cool sight once we get there. And of course, as always, I'll put the link for that in the video description. So as you can see, sitting in front of us right here is the new twin turboprop from Mitsubishi, the MU-2, and that's designed by Inibuilds. I say new, it's not a new plane by any means, but it's a fairly recent release. And I think that's also on sale right now for $9.99 in the marketplace. So if you like it, pick it up. And when I first saw the reviews for this, I was like, yeah, it's just kind of an old, boring turboprop. But this thing is anything but boring. For one thing, the way it operates is very unique. The way it flies is very unique. The way it's designed is unique. So it's pretty cool all the way around. So the first thing you need to do to get this thing started up, and this is where I saw a few sticking points from folks that were, let me adjust my camera angle just a little bit here. There we go, that's better. When I watched the initial reviews for this, some of the reviewers were going through the procedures and they just could not get the plane all the way started up. And if you follow the in-sim checklist properly, it will get you all the way through the startup procedure. But I'll show you where they're getting hung up in case you like this plane enough that you decide to pick it up for yourself. And I hope you do. It's really, really cool. I'm glad I added it to my hangars. So I'm not going to tell you what everything's doing as we're actually going through it, but I will tell you where people seem to be getting hung up. So the first thing you do is push that button, then push this one up here, and then hit the starter. And this is where it gets a little weird. So we have not turned the fuel on yet. You got to wait for the oil pressure to come up to about 40, and then you turn the fuel on, and then the engines will start up, which is really wild. I can't think of any other planes that start like that. And there's no condition levers. I can't think of any turboprops that don't have condition levers. So that's pretty unique too. All right, so that's good. Let's get that going. And we'll do the same thing for this side. You can hear it starting up there. And they got this little, I don't know, I guess phone over here. If you hit map, it'll pull up a little basic map, and you can change the settings. The only settings you can change is the cargo in the back. You can change it over to passengers, which is pretty cool, but other than that, it really doesn't do too much. But I guess it's nice to just have it there if you like having a phone nearby. All right, so that one's good to go. We're all set for that. All right, we'll give it just a second to run up, and they'll be on our way. Let's go ahead and change our CDI to get on GPS navigation. Our initial cruise altitude will be 3,000 feet as we head along the coastline, and once we start climbing up this mountain, we're going to get up to 15,000 feet as quick as we can. And that is one other very interesting feature about this plane. As you're going to see, getting up off the ground pretty slow, almost seems a bit underpowered, but this thing can climb at least 2,500 feet a minute, no problem, probably even 3,000 feet a minute, really, really fast. So that's really odd that it would get up and going so slow, and the top cruise speed for a plane that climbs like that seems relatively low. You'd start getting up to overspeeding at, what, around 250 knots? So it's got some power if it needs to climb. All right, let's turn the parking brake off. Taxi lights on. And we're moving. This airport must be one of the ones they included for the Hawaii update, because I have no ground traffic turned on. And look at all that stuff. It looks beautiful. I didn't go into the terminal, which I probably should have, to see if they did the inside of the terminal. But everything out here looks good. Hilo is a little bit more bland, and I don't think there were any freeware add-ons for that, but there's plenty of payware, I believe, if you want to touch that one up too. If you like flying out here. I initially had the live... Look at all this stuff on the ground. Look at that. Awesome. I had the live weather turned on. Not a cloud in the sky out here. Almost no wind. Once I got over the mountains, though, over to Hilo, it was completely overcast and raining, which is kind of how it goes sometimes when there's great big mountains. So we had to put it back to the good old standby few cloud settings. All right, then we go this way. Yeah, but this airport looks really nice. One of the interesting things about this plane is it does not have trailing edge ailerons. They're deflectors up on top of the wings. And I read that they did that because they wanted to use full span flaps all the way across the back, which we actually need to set for 2 notches for takeoff. They'll be at 20 degrees. And they did that because they wanted to have a real low approach speed with this thing. And it can get down, for as long as it takes to take off, it can get down and stopped pretty quick. But that's why they did that, which is also fairly unique. And man, when the flaps are all the way down, they are truly barn doors. So you really got to watch your approach speed, because if you get too low, it'll just drop like a rock. As far as the scenery goes, the volcanoes are going to look cool just because they're kind of unique. Of course, the observatories are going to look absolutely phenomenal. But as we're climbing up the sides of the mountain, you'll see a little bit of that patchwork type stuff. And this plane is also really low performance drag. I've got everything turned way, way up, so that should be pretty cool. All in all, just a really neat plane. And I like my planes to feel a little bit lived in. I think they started building these in the 1960s, and I think the last one rolled out in 1984. I don't like my jetliners. I like those to be pristine. I feel safer when they're cleaner. But everything else, I like it to be a little worn out. And this one definitely is, which is very cool. And it'll also do that deal where the inside of the glass will get fogged up if it's real humid out until you turn the air conditioner on, which I just love. Nice feature. And the sunshades work. Look at that. Really cool for this price point, I think. And the fact that it just flies so uniquely. All just a nice little package. Alright, let's see. I always take the... Okay, so that's the turnaround spot there. We don't want to go that way. Our runway's over here. There it is. Look at that. The paint and everything looks just great out here. It looks really, really good. And I've got a special treat for you guys. We're going to attempt an ILS approach, which we don't get to do very often. Well, and that's something else we don't do very often. I reverted back to my old career mode days. I stopped at the old short line there. Well, I'm sure you pilots will appreciate that. We usually just get right on the runway and get going. But I've got the live traffic turned off too, so we don't have to worry about anybody hitting us, hopefully. Alright, once we get set up here, I'm just going to recheck those flaps to make sure they're good. We'll get our landing lights on and we'll be on our way. This is a nice wide runway too. Alright, we do have the 2 notches of flaps, so taxi lights off, landing lights on, full props, and full throttle. Rotate speed's about 110 knots, and like I said, it's going to take a little while to get up there. If anyone's from Hawaii, or you've been out here, or you live out here now, I'll ask for your forgiveness in advance. Some of these place names are very, very difficult to pronounce. And out of respect for the locals in any of the areas we're flying over, I always try to find a video of someone saying the names properly, just so I can try to do it. But a lot of these I couldn't even find videos of anyone saying them, so we'll just do the best we can. Alright, we're up. And we'll get it on autopilot once we get off the runway here. And we feel a little nose heavy, so I'll trim up a bit. Alright, take the notch, flaps up to 1 notch. Listen to that sound. Isn't that great? Hear the wind blowing through there. And flaps all the way up. And we'll go ahead and kick off the landing lights. Alright, so autopilot on, nav, and we'll climb at 1,000 feet a minute because that'll be no problem with this thing. And we'll stop at 3,000 feet initially. Yeah, I mean, you can see here, this doesn't look right at all, this golf course here. The coastlines are a little bit blurry. But what makes this flight is going to be those volcanoes, because they are cool. And you'll notice that there are very, very few sandy beaches out here. Almost all of it is that black volcanic rock, which makes a lot of sense because all these islands are just huge volcanoes. Alright, so here's my first attempt at speaking the local language. There's going to be an area down here to our left near this extraordinarily green golf course called Kahalukeahu, if I'm saying that right. And the golf course that we're going to see, let me just zoom out a little bit on a little NavMap so I get our bookmarks right. The golf course that we're going to see belongs to a place called the Kona Country Club. And it's not this one down here. It's going to be up on this next bay up here. But on the corner of the bay, there's a place called the Outrigger Resort and Spa, which was an in-sim POI. Why they decided to mark that out, I don't know, but we'll look at it just since they did. And I checked out the website for that place. It's right along the water. And rooms start at about $350 a night, which seems pricey if you're staying off the interstate, but right along the coastline in Hawaii, I thought that seemed like a pretty good deal. But yeah, if you're wanting to go to a beach and just lay on one, probably be better off by the pool, because there aren't a lot of beaches out here. Some of the resorts on the other side of the island did have some sandy beaches, and I don't even know if those are natural or man-made. Alright, so here's where the Kona is here, and this is going to be the Outrigger right here, which just looks like a resort. But they made it a POI in the sim, so we're going to take a look at it. We'll pull the throttles back a little bit. A good cruise torque pressure for this thing they said is around 50, so we'll try to stay there until we start climbing again. Everything's looking good. Alright, let's take a look at this thing while we're out here. There's the golf course. Well, that one's not as green as the last one was. And there's the Outrigger Resort. That's it. If you want a mani-pedi, you can go there and do it. Alright, this next larger bay up here also has a strange name. It's called Kealakekua. And this place has some very interesting history behind it. On this side of it, once we come over this ridge, maybe we'll be able to spot it. There's a little memorial that's an obelisk marking the spot where Captain James Cook was killed. And if you've never heard of that guy, well, he was kind of a big deal as far as seafaring explorers go. He was a British fellow who also happened to be on board the HMS Endeavour, as she became the first European vessel to explore much of the Australian coastline after departing England in 1768. And they sailed from there down around the Cape of Good Hope to get there. And you'll know exactly where the Cape of Good Hope is if you saw a recent South Africa flight. So that was his first voyage. History making for sure. On his second voyage in 1772, he was promoted to commander of the HMS Resolution, becoming one of the first to cross the Arctic Circle in 1773, and he almost discovered Antarctica. They had a hunch that there was a big chunk of land down there, but he had to turn north when his ship ran out of provisions, which was fairly common back then. Alright, so the marker should be right down here somewhere. That's probably it right there, because that's about the right spot in the map where it was, but it doesn't look like an obelisk, does it? But on his third trip in 1776, a very infamous year, the guy outdid himself yet again, becoming the first European to make formal contact with the locals out here in Hawaii. And he named these islands the Sandwich Islands after the 4th Earl of Sandwich, who was also the Lord of the Admiralty at the time. And from there he sailed all the way up to the Bering Strait looking for the fabled Northwest Passage. And after that he made his way back down here to Hawaii, where he became the first to go ashore and hang out with the locals. And apparently things didn't go so well. I read that he got a little bit crazy in the head by the time he got back down here again, so he pulled into this bay back there, the one that we're looking at, to try to repair a broken mast. But got a little sideways with the locals when he asked his men, ordered his men to go on shore and get the wood from a local ritual site. Just kind of make a mental bookmark of this place. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a minute, but I want to finish telling you about Cook. So after he took the wood from the locals, they responded by stealing one of Cook's longboats. So Cook stole their king, literally, and the guy walked off willingly, apparently. Maybe he didn't know what he was in for. But before they could get off the shore, Cook was clubbed in the noggin and then stabbed to death back there in the surf. And despite the whole affair going down the way it did, for some reason the locals still had some degree of veneration for the good captain, giving him a royal burial, which involved baking his corpse until the flesh was removed so the skeleton could be displayed as a religious icon. But apparently they wound up giving some of what was left of him back to his crew for a burial at sea. Alright, so let's go ahead and set our altitude for 15,000, because that's where we're heading next. And then we'll start climbing like crazy. Alright, so I'm going to set our climb rate at 3,000 feet a minute initially, just to see if she can do it. They said the best climb speed is 150 knots, so we'll see how that goes. Alright, 3,000 feet a minute. I'll just keep an eye on that as we're climbing. This looks great out here, doesn't it? It's not till we get up past the tree line where you'll see kind of that weird, patchy-looking coloration. But of all the volcanoes we've flown over, like most of the volcanoes we've flown over, this one is entirely unique. It really looks cool. And this is called a shield volcano. You can tell because it kind of has a shield shape to it with gently sloping edges like that. I'll tell you more about that as we get up there. So that other little spot I told you to make a mental bookmark for is even more fascinating in my opinion than the story of Captain Cook. It was a royal compound called Puʻuhonua Hōnaunau. And it served as a safe house for warriors and leaders who were defeated in battle but not killed. If they could make it all the way back down to that place, sometimes traveling for weeks through the forests here, sometimes swimming for days to get there, if they could get there, then they could kind of be rehabbed, I guess, and redeemed and returned to society without harm. And I don't have time to give you the full story about that place, but I am going to include a link for a short film that I found on that, and I watched the whole thing. It's about 22 minutes long. And if you feel like checking it out, it's definitely worth it. Very, very interesting. I've never heard of anything like that or seen anything like that on any of our journeys so far. Very cool. And they go into some of the history of the islands and the tribes out here that were always fighting with each other. Alright, so we've started our climb up the slopes of Mauna Loa, the first of our 2 volcanoes, which rises to almost 14,000 feet above sea level. But if we consider its height from the seabed, it can claim about 30,000 feet in total height. So all we're seeing here is the top half of this thing. And they say it started building itself up from the ocean floor anywhere from 700,000 to 1 million years ago, and probably popped above the waterline for the first time roughly 300,000 years after that, which may have been as recently as 400,000 years ago. And while we're on the subject of creation, the reason these islands are in a chain like this is due to a slow tectonic drift to the northwest over a undersea magma chamber called the Hawaii hotspot, which makes this island, being the southernmost of them all, also the youngest. So as the chain continues to meander its way towards Asia, this volcano will eventually move off the hotspot and become extinct. So if you're looking to pick up a little real estate up here at the top, it'll probably be considered safe from eruptions in another 500,000 years or so. And even though it's still an active volcano, it hasn't been super active. They did have an eruption about a year ago, but the last one before that was in 1984. And these aren't the kind where the top blows off the thing. They're more the percolating variety out here. So this looks cool, and it really is that colored. You'll see on the satellite map at the end that it's got all these, lava flows running down the side, but you can see these lines here. Just different angles of the sun, different times of the year when the pictures were taken makes it look like that, unfortunately. But it's quite a sight regardless. And this lava, when it runs down, can flow a pretty good distance. In fact, portions of Hilo, where we're landing, were formed by a lava flow in the late 1800s. But all in all, considering its total height and mass, Mauna Loa is considered the second largest volcano on Earth after a spot called Tamu Massif, which is about halfway between here and Japan, but that thing is currently totally submerged, so I think we could probably say that this one wins by default. Because something you can't marvel at really doesn't count, in my opinion. Alright, our airspeed's still okay, but I'm going to go ahead and slow it down a little bit as far as our climb rate, because we don't want to get under 150 knots. We're almost there anyway. And considering there was nothing out here but water until about 400,000 years ago, which is pretty dang recent by geological standards, this place is even more recent on the human habitation scale. As far as we know at this point, the first people didn't set up shop out here until around 400 AD, maybe a little bit after that. And they likely arrived from the Polynesian islands. In fact, some of their gods they worship down here were Polynesian gods, which is why they figure they came from Polynesia. And those things are about 2,000 miles away, and that is something I find utterly astonishing. And I've read a few books lately whose authors claim the first inhabitants of South America may have also arrived by boat, not the Bering Land Bridge, which is the standing hypothesis. And if that's true, they suspect they may have made that even more astonishing crossing several tens of thousands of years ago, before the last ice age, which is what would have connected modern-day Alaska to Russia, if the land bridge theory is correct. So once we come around the summit, we're going to see how quick we can get down to 13,500 feet to see the first observation station, which is on the other side of this, on the northern flank. And they opened these things up in 1956 after a failed attempt at building something right on the top here, and I don't know why. I couldn't figure out why they decided to move them back down. Maybe it was an altitude sickness problem, which I know all too well. So they dropped them down about 2,000 feet lower. They had around 11,000 is where they are now. That's where we're going to see them. So I don't want to clip the top of the mountain, so once we make this turn back towards the north, I'm going to go ahead and drop down just a little bit so we can get a better look at them. We'll drop down to 11.5. I think that'll be okay because they're at 11,000 feet. And these are not the big astronomical observatories like we'll see over on Mauna Kea, which is right over here. All these were intended to be, and still are, atmospheric sensors, measuring things like CO2, cosmic radiation, ozone levels, stuff like that. And you'll also notice everything down here is much smaller than the big telescopes that we're going to see at the next stop. Alright, 11,500 feet. Let's go to 13,500. I don't want to cut it too close. And we'll go down to 1,000 feet a minute and pull the throttles back just a little bit. They do have a couple domes at this first one, but those are for 2 solar sensors they have and keep tabs on the sun. I don't think they're big telescopes, at least I hope they're not, unless they want to fry all their optics. We'll spot these things right when we come over this ridge. Look at the size of that thing. And it looks like they got... Maybe these are little buildings up here? Yeah, I would definitely have a problem with that. I did not do well at Breckenridge if you saw our Whistler Mountain flight. Not a good experience for old Nickster out there. Unless you call having migraines and throwing up all night a good experience. Alright, where's this little station? And I thought there were big telescopes out here too, but that's not the case. These are much, much smaller. I think this is going to be it right up here. This next place, though, is going to be huge. Just like the mountains. See, from here, just looking down this way, looks pretty good. Looks really cool. Just coming up that side. We're kind of close to, though, so I'm not going to be too picky. Look at that. That's it. That's all that's over here. Boy, it's quite a hike to get up here, though, isn't it? Imagine driving up there. And there's something that looks like it might be a little airstrip next to it. This thing right here, but it's not marked out in little NavMap or the sim. So, I mean, I guess you could probably land there if you wanted to. But that's it. That's all that's on the side of this mountain. Very cool. And now we're moving on. Okay, now we got to get back up to 16,000 feet because these observatories are at the very top of this next one. So we'll go ahead and set that up now. And I think we'll probably be safe climbing at 1,000 feet a minute for this one. Give it a little more throttle again. So as we head over to the next stop, along the way, if you look down to our left, you will see an active strip that you can select for the Bradshaw Army Airfield, which, if you lose an engine up here, is easily within glide range because it's about 5,000 feet below us, and it's got a paved runway of about 3,600 feet. But surrounding that area is a place called Puʻuhonua Training Area, which is not only the largest Department of Defense installation in Hawaii, but all of the Pacific. And they started building that out around 1943 for live fire training exercises during World War II. This is going to be it right over here. So these are all the barracks and stuff over here. There's the field. And I think they're still using it for live fire exercises. And I could definitely think of worse places to be stationed than having to come out here. Alright, so getting to the observatories before we get to them. If you don't already know it, having a ground-based telescope as high in the atmosphere as you can get them is always a good idea because it gets above most of the light pollution, and there probably isn't a lot of that out here because there aren't any really big cities. There's another one of those seams out there. Doggone it. So they get above all the atmosphere, get above the light pollution if there is any, and getting as close to the equator as you can is also very helpful because as the Earth wobbles around on its axis throughout the year, it allows you to see most of the night sky. And this place checks a lot of those boxes, which is why we're going to see one of the most incredible collections of telescopes on Earth up here. In total, they've got 12 observatories with 13 scopes. One of them has 2 inside of it. And a few of my favorites. Of course, I had to read all about every one of them because they're all just incredible. Some of them are pretty old. Some of them aren't even done being built yet. There's the airfield. Yeah, you could definitely glide down there, no problem. So the first one is the James Clerk Maxwell, which is the largest sub-millimeter wavelength telescope in the world, with a primary mirror that's 15 meters across, which is really big. And then they have the Subaru telescope, run by Japan, of course, and they've got, I think, 12 different countries that are operating these things. And the Subaru used to have the largest monolithic primary mirror in the world when they opened it in 1998 until somebody else beat it out in 2005. And monolithic means that it was just one huge mirror. Nowadays they make the big ones with a composite of smaller mirrors. And here's a little trivia for you on that note. If you've ever looked up at the night sky and seen the Seven Sisters or Pleiades open star cluster, which is often confused for the Little Dipper, the Japanese call that Subaru, which also happens to be the insignia for the Subaru automobiles. Now you know. And if they can ever finish it, the 30-meter telescope will become the largest visible light telescope in the world. They started building that in 2014 and have encountered some very fierce opposition from the locals who are sick and tired of the continued construction on top of one of their most sacred mountaintops. So they're not sure if that's ever going to be done. They're considering an alternate site in the Canary Islands, but they've got a lot of it built. I'll show you what it looks like, and I'll spoil it for you. It looks awesome. That's it right over there. All right, this little thing right here might be one of my favorites as far as interesting this goes. It's called the Very Long Baseline Array, and that one is a radio dish. It's not a visible light telescope. And And that thing is one of 10 radio telescopes around the world that operate in unison to create what amounts to one gigantic telescope with a size equal to the greatest distance between them, which in this case is 5,351 miles, which is a heck of a lot easier than making a radio dish that big. Look at that thing. It looks great. Beautiful. All right, let's look at these guys up here. Look at that stuff. Look at the colors and everything. Look at all these cones all over it. Just awesome. The light reflecting off that. So that's the big one there. That's going to be the 30 meter. I can't imagine how much they've already dumped into that. And they said that if that ever gets finished, that's the last thing they're going to build up here. At least they're saying that. Just to keep everybody chilled out. And the guy that made these does a lot of observatory packs all over the world, so I'm sure we'll check out some of his other stuff, because they all looked really, really good. Alright, so now we got to start coming way down. I'm going to come all the way down to 3,000 feet. And we got to do it kind of quick. So we'll get that dialed in. How are we doing on our airspeed? Looks good. Okay. Alright, 3,000 feet, and we'll start coming down at 1,500 feet a minute, which I hope will be fast enough. And we're on our way. Just want to watch our airspeed to make sure we don't get too fast. We'll pull those throttles back a little bit more. Alright, so now that we've checked out all the stuff on top of Mauna Kea, I'll tell you a little bit more about the mountain itself, which, unlike its sister back there, is an inactive volcano. She hasn't done much of anything for about 4,000 years. And it's just a hair taller than Mauna Loa 2, beating her out by just 125 feet, making it the highest point on all the islands, and the second highest point on any island on Earth. New Guinea, which we will be checking out very soon, I'll tell you more about that later, has a peak at over 2,000 feet higher than this place, so it's not like this one's a close second. Look at that down there. It looks beautiful. The field of view in this thing is pretty nice too. I'm really liking this plane. But along with Mauna Loa, that one back there is considered one of the most sacred places on all the islands by the indigenous culture, which is why they probably aren't going to let them build anything else up there if they have their way. And you probably didn't notice it because I forgot to point it out, but there's a tiny little lake up on the top of that last one called Lake Waiyao. And that thing is at an elevation of 13,020 feet, considered one of the highest in the world. I think it may be the third highest and probably the highest in the United States. And scientists aren't really sure why that's even there, because it shouldn't be. Considering that the whole mountain is nothing but porous volcanic rock, any standing water should quickly sink into the ground. So there's a couple theories of why that may be hanging out up there. One is that there might be a layer of permafrost underneath it because it is cold up there. But another faction says that maybe way back in the last ice age there was a big glacier up there, and they think it may have just compacted the ground so hard underneath it that it makes it hard for it to sink down in there. But you can see there was no other water up there. It just pools in that one spot. But whatever the case, you better not even think about swimming in it because it's sacred. Probably a good rule of thumb is just don't go anywhere near either of those mountains. Don't even look at them if you can avoid it, or you might wind up like old Captain Cook. Alright, we're rapidly making our way down to the town of Hilo along the east coast here. And this was one of the first locations settled by the Polynesians when they arrived on the island. And once the Europeans made their way out here, it quickly got to be a huge sugarcane plantation area. And they weren't small operations either. By 1887, they had over 26,000 Chinese workers down there slanging cane. And though they weren't slaves, their treatment was probably only marginally better if it was anything like they were treating the guys building the railways across the United States. And they haven't had to really deal with any lava flow issues in the last few hundred years out here, but earthquakes and the ensuing tsunamis have been a bit of a hazard. In 1946, an 8.6 magnitude quake created a 46-foot high wave that killed 96 residents in Hilo, and even more on other parts of the island. And then another one off the coast of Chile in 1960 started another tsunami that killed another 61 people. And after that first one, they built a lot of tsunami warning sirens. But I guess just from all of the testing and everything, people weren't taking them seriously by the time that one came through. And they said if everyone would have just heeded the warnings, which apparently gave them ample time to get to higher ground, nobody probably would have died. And incidentally, I mentioned that last quake in our Santiago flight. It was known as the Valdivia quake, and registered as a 9.6 magnitude, and that one was the most powerful ever recorded. And estimates of the global death toll from that one could be as high as 6,000. But as far as tsunami destruction goes, nothing comes close to that 2004 one they had in Indonesia. which killed nearly 230,000 people. Second on the list after that one was around 100,000, which is still a lot, but not anything close to 230,000. All right, we're going to take a right-hand turn here, and then there's a couple of spots we're going to try to see if we can lay eyes on. And neither of them are all that spectacular to look at, but they are POIs in the sim, so we might as well say that we saw them. And it's going to be the Hilo Medical Center, which I'll probably have to lean out the window to get a good look at, and the Imiloa Astronomy Center. The medical center looks about like you might expect a hospital to look, but I'm kind of wondering if they used it as a VFR landmark for the adjacent Rainbow Falls, which was also mentioned in that POI. And we don't have a good angle to see what the falls look like, but if you want to check that out, and they aren't real big, I'll show you where they are on the satellite map at the end. But if you look at pictures of them on the ground, I'm going to bet they shot a lot of movies at those because they looked really familiar to me. Alright, I'm going to lean out the window and just circle it because I got to lean away from the mic, but I'll show you where the hospital is. And the falls would be just to the east of that. So that's the hospital. You want to see what one looks like. The Astronomy Center, on the other hand, is a little bit more interesting than the Medical Center, provided you aren't in dire need of a medical center. And I checked out their website. It looks like it's a showcase of a lot of the discoveries they made up at the observatories, along with a few exhibits describing how those scopes work, which I would definitely check out if I was out here in the area. All right, let me lean out the window to show you this place too. Just a little white box. I don't know why they added that as a point of interest. Why not talk about everything else out here? But maybe there's not a lot going on. And of course they have a planetarium in there. I'd probably skip that. Those places always creep me out a little bit, despite my fascination with astronomy. Something about that big projector always gives me the heebie-jeebies. Alright guys, rare treat for us for this channel anyway. As you guys know, we typically don't follow standard approach procedures on these flights, not because I don't appreciate them or enjoy mapping them out if I wasn't recording these flights for us. But a lot of times they just don't work well for the stuff that we're trying to see near the airports. But we're in luck today because we're coming in on runway 26 here, which does have an ILS signal. And we're going to be coming in over the water, so there's nothing that we're going to try to see. Well, look at that. That looks like an airstrip, doesn't it? But that's not indicated on little NavMap, and I don't remember seeing one in the sim either. Unless it's a drag strip, which it could be because they got another little track right there next to it. And that looks like a little burnout there. I bet it is. I bet it's a drag strip. So, we're going to fly out here, and if you take this exact flight plan, it will set you up for the transition point at, what is it called? CECOB, C-E-K-O-B. So we need to be at 2,700 feet for that, so since we're not quite down there yet, and I think we still have plenty of time to get down there, we'll set up for that, keep descending. We got about 13 miles before we start taking the turn for that, so I think we'll be okay. And then we got to get down to Waikik, which is our next waypoint, which is a great waypoint name for out here. And we need to be at 1,800 feet for that. You know what, heck, I'm just going to go to 1,800 feet because we're going to be out over the water anyway. So we'll set that up, and that's where we should be able to grab the ILS signal. We'll see if it works. It's worked twice for me on test flights. The last one it didn't, so if we have to hand fly it in, we'll hand fly it in, but we'll see how it goes. And let's just watch that airspeed. We're going a little slow now, and I think we're going to get to our altitude in time, so we'll probably be okay. So this thing says to get down to 150 for gear speed, flap speed, and it says touchdown at around 125, and you really got to watch that airspeed because once those flaps are all the way out, this thing will just drop out of the sky if you get too slow. So we'll keep an eye on that too. Everything looking good. Alright, so while we're heading out there for our turn, I'll tell you about some upcoming flights because we got a lot of cool stuff in the hopper. As I mentioned on that last flight, I've got almost 2 weeks off from work, so that means my wife will enjoy not seeing me during the Christmas break. First one, which I hope to have up on Christmas Day, is going to be a Christmas lights flight. You may have heard about the recent volcanic eruption up in Iceland, which of course we won't see in the sim, but I want to check out the volcano where that's happening. And we're going to take the Kodiak out there because there's some Christmas livery for that, which is going to be a great little plane for that flight. And there's a Northern Lights add-on pack that I've been wanting to check out for a while, so we'll probably do a little night flying as we come in, see what that looks like. And let's see what else we got. One of our members had talked about flying out to PNG, Papua New Guinea. And I'm sure you guys have been out there before, but if you've been out there a lot, and if you've zoomed in close on the world map, you know that they don't have great satellite image coverage out there. Which means lots and lots of points where they just jam in that default vegetation that looks all pixelated. So I figured you guys might appreciate me trying to find a flight plan that'll let us see some really cool stuff And I'm going to try to make it weave in between all that and see if we can totally avoid seeing it and still get up in the mountains there. So if I can pull it off, we'll have that one up after the Christmas lights flight. And that huge volcano I mentioned at the end of the last flight is out in New Zealand. I said I couldn't remember where that was. It created Lake Taupo. I think that's how you say that. And it is the site of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the last 1,000,000 years. And just south of it, there's 2 other cool-looking volcanoes, so we'll go out there and check that one out. And we still got La Paz, Bolivia, the highest elevation international airport in the world. That's going to be awesome. The city of La Paz around there looks awesome. It's built down into a valley, so we'll check that out. And I'd really like to set up a German castles tour. I've seen a couple other sim channels where they're flying around out there, and it looks pretty cool, and I think there's a lot of add-ons for that stuff too. Alright, so once we make this second turn, we're going to do 2 turns, and I want to get a little bit deeper into the feather before I switch over to V-lock and approach mode, because last time it just wouldn't even register, so I'm going to take my time with that. And we'll start slowing down a little bit because I need to be down to 150 for gear speed, but we've leveled off, so everything's looking good. Everything's looking good. Alright, we'll go ahead and turn the landing lights back on. So a little bit about this plane while we're heading in. The first flight was in 1963, and they produced a total of 704 of these guys, all the way up through 86. I think I said 84 before. And they were built both in Japan and in San Angelo, Texas. And I already told you about the bizarre control surfaces, which isn't all that strange. Some of the other planes do that too. But it does add a nice little feature to the flight dynamics. And they also said that it helps in stall recovery if you drop a wing to not have the ailerons drop down below the wing like that. I haven't tried stalling this thing yet, so I can't attest to that. But one of the interesting uses for these planes today, in the U.S. anyway, is that the U.S. Air Force is flying them down at Tyndall, here in Florida, where I live. And they have retired pilots fly them to represent various live aircraft when training air battle manager students at the Weapons Control School. So I thought that was pretty dang cool. Alright, I'm just kind of watching a little NavMap here, seeing what his turn's coming up. Everything's looking good so far. Let's see if I can turn my head enough for you to look in the back. Oh, I got the passenger setting on. It was cargo stuff last time I flew it. I don't think I changed it, so that's a nice treat. Alright, so I didn't program the next waypoint. I got CCOB in there. I didn't program in Waukeke, but we're going to fly right through it. So I'm going to look on a little nav map to see when we hit that, and when we do, that's when I'm going to turn the V-lock on. See if we can grab that ILS signal. We're at the right altitude. One of the early challenges they had with this plane was the ability of anyone with multi-engine ratings to fly it, but the problem with that was it performed much more like a small jet with the huge flaps and the absence of the ailerons, which adds a lot of quirks that people weren't familiar with, and apparently all that put together led to quite a few incidents. So the FAA wound up having to implement some additional training requirements to fly these bad boys, which seemed to have helped a little. But apparently they were plagued with lots of different issues. Alright, so I'm going to keep slowing down some more, because once we get on the glide slope, it's going to turn nose down, and we will start picking up some speed. So I'm going to see if I can dial that right into 150 there. Alright, we're not in the feather yet, so I'm just going to keep riding it out, because we do have our runway heading. We're good. Let me just get myself comfortable here. Yeah, when I came out here before, I mean, it'd be fun to do a full-on rainy approach like it was before, since we do have the ILS, but we wouldn't have been able to see anything in helo, so we just went back to the old few clouds. And on the ground here, I mean, the ground texturing doesn't look great, unfortunately. Some of the add-on airports look pretty good for it. Alright, we're in the feather. Let's see if this works. Oh, I gotta get my ILS signal in. That would help. So let's see, 116.9. Click it over. And adjust the CDI. Yeah, it's not picking it up again. I'll fly a little bit further. Oh, it says we're under it. That's why. Alright, well, we're hand flying it in. No problem. Won't be my first rodeo. Okay, gears down. Love the actuation noise. Sounds so good. Listen to the wind noise. Love that. I don't know why I'm just getting such a thrill from that. Alright, so I'm going to have to give it throttle once these flaps start coming down, because we're going to slow way down. Well, you know what? I probably could have caught that, because we'd be flying into it. It's above us right now. That's fine. We're too deep at this point. No turning back. I'll just use it as an indicator for myself then. I'll ILS myself in here, for crying out loud. Alright, 1 notch of flaps. Increase the throttle. Well, you can tell, look how it's nosing up, just putting the flaps down. I'll trim it down. Man, if I let go of the yoke, it's just going to go straight up. Well, I don't know. I feel like we're a little high. I'm just going to disregard that and start coming down. Because we're definitely high. Maybe it's picking up a VOR somewhere else. Maybe I grabbed the wrong signal. No, because this one worked before for the ILS. Whatever. We'll make it down. Alright, some more throttle. And here is the full flaps. And now I really got to watch the airspeed. Alright, I think the GA parking is on the other side of the runway here, so we'll kind of cruise down the runway a little bit. And this does have functional reverse thrusting, so that's cool. Or reverse pitch, I guess. Yeah, the pappies say I'm still too high. But that's okay, we're heading down the runway a bit. So once we get pulled over, we'll pull over a little NavMap, take a closer look at everything. And I'll show you where those falls are, because if anyone wants to fly back out there, if they actually did the falls, which would be extremely rare for the sim, let me know in the comments, because I'd like to go check it out. But again, they're pretty small. Not like Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls. Still too high. Airspeed's a little bit low. Feels good, looks good. I'm comfortable with this. Well, there you go. It just picked it up. What the heck is going on with that? Man, I was way back there before. Way back there. So I wonder what it was trying to read off of. Maybe it just wasn't registering before, but man, I shouldn't have to be that close. That would not work at all. Well, it's a good thing we weren't in the rainy weather. Alright, so I'm just going to keep the throttle here until we get down, because I think we're at about the right speed. Man, I'm really liking this plane. This is probably the, I don't know, 10th time I've flown it. I think I like it a little bit more each time I do it. Alright, well, it's going to glide a little bit. I'll go ahead and cut the throttle back. Boy, it just drops once you do that. Just drops. Alright. Flaps up. And we'll just do a little roll off here. Look at that mountain out there. Awesome. Let's see, where's the other one? It's a little obscured by clouds. Yeah, I would definitely like to come out. I don't think I could handle going up to the top after what happened in Breckenridge. I'd probably check out the astronomy center, do all my learning from there. But my dad did come out here recently, and he said he did go up to the observatory, and he said it was awesome. He said it took forever to get up there, though. And he said he was a little lightheaded, not surprisingly. 16,000 feet. Alright, let's see. Looks like a taxiway up here. We'll follow these green lights. Just get off the runway, and shut her down, and wrap it up. So if you guys have a place you want to see, I'm down for anything. There just needs to be stuff to talk about, and it can't be a super long flight. I try to keep everything under an hour if I can, unless there's just a ton of really cool stuff to see. And if there's a certain plane you'd like to fly, let me know. The only thing that doesn't work very well are the big liners. Just too fast and flying too high to see anything. Unless there's a spot that's just such a huge natural formation that might be worth flying over, wouldn't mind doing that. Any traffic? Nope, we're good. It looks like they've even animated the cones on the props pretty well, too. Sometimes they don't look like they're spinning at the right speed, but those look good, too. Man, this is a nice plane. Well worth the price, in my opinion. Well worth the price. Inibuilds usually does a good job, too. Alright, I'm just going to pull over here to these things. Won't get too close to the fuel truck, or it's going to pop up the refill screen. Ooh, look, they even got some little parking spots. We're going to come over right here. That's what we'll do, by golly. Alright, bring our pitch back down to taxi. Oh, I'm going to miss it. Oh, no, I'm not. There we go. There we go. Yeah. All right. Well, that's close enough. Okay. We made it. All right. So parking brake on. Cut the engines. We got our flaps up. All right. Let's check out a little NavMap. So just to illustrate what I was talking about before, if you've never really taken a close look at the arrangement of the Hawaiian Islands, so everything is moving, the tectonic plates are kind of moving this way, and the only way we know that is because if this is where the Hawaii hotspot is, all of these islands have moved over the top of that as they were formed. And that other huge volcano, which apparently is the tallest in the world, which is completely submerged, is, I think, right here. But again, you can't see any of it, so who really cares if you can't look at it? All right, so let's zoom on back in there and take a look at just the coloration and everything. It looked way better even up close, but that is definitely a wild-looking volcano and just so huge. And if you ever want to fly over here, I've flown all around this island. There's some cool stuff down here. There's another POI down here, which is about as interesting as what we saw in Hilo, but the landscape just looks really, really cool. All right, so here's where we left from. That's a really long and hard to pronounce name. I could get the first word probably, but I'm not going to try the second one. I just called it Kona International, and boy, did it look good for an in-sim mod. There was that weird-looking golf course. And then we came down here to the Kona Resort and the Outrigger Spa. And you can see, no beaches. About $350 a night. Might be worth checking out. If you're out in the area for waterfront hotel room, probably not too bad. And you could get a mani-pedi. And then we came down here. This is where roughly where Captain Cook was stabbed to death. They don't know if that's the exact spot, but it's probably close enough to keep everybody happy. And this is the bay that he came into. And I don't know where he tried to steal the wood from, but it might have been from this place. So this was the safe house I was telling you about. And it looks a lot better here than it did in the sim. But they have this huge retaining wall that was going all the way around it. And the way that they did it, if the guy made it all the way out here, there was like these two white flags hanging from a stick, which you'll learn all about if you watch that video. And if you got to that point, he was safe. They couldn't kill him if he made it there. And this is a big nature trail that walks all around the park, and you can see they got some other ruins out here. And I think there's a royal burial ground somewhere out here as well. So this is also pretty sacred land for the locals. So then we started our climb, and there was a spot out here which I saw on the Google map that seemed unusually high up this mountain for a residential area. I'm not seeing it out here, so maybe they started building it up more recently and this picture was taken. But it was like way, way up here. Like I thought it was unusually high, above the tree line even. So if you want to spot that, look at the Google Maps. And here's where the atmospheric observatories were, and that looked pretty small compared to this next place. And that does look kind of like a little strip there, doesn't it? Definitely a lot shorter to fly up here than drive, I would think. But not much going on there. And this here looks just like a storage area. They got some campers and stuff down there. It's a little bit clearer on the Google map. But this one's at about 11,000. Top of the mountain's just a little over 13,000. So just bear that in mind as you're trying to get your altitudes dialed in for that climb if you're going to take this flight. And there's old Bradshaw. There's their barracks and all that out there. I don't see any explosive craters. See plenty of other volcanic craters. And if you want to fly on this part of the island, look at this stuff. I mean, all of it looks great. Just pick a spot and fly there. All these canyons look pretty cool. They got more volcanic peaks all the way through here. Just a great flight. Anywhere in Hawaii is pretty cool. We'll head up to some of the northern islands later. And then here's where all the really cool stuff was. So there's that very large baseline array radio telescope, one of 9 others that make up the huge global-sized telescope. And there's that tiny little lake. Look at that thing. No other water anywhere except that little guy. And in some of the satellite images, it looks like it's kind of drying out a little bit, so I hope that doesn't disappear. But do not swim in that, whatever you do. And in this image, they don't even have the 30-meter telescope built. That was somewhere out here, so this must be before 2014, because that's when they started building that. But it will be in there for the add-on pack. Look at all those things. That just looks awesome, and it looks so good in the sim. Very cool. So we were at 16,000 feet here, and then started coming down to 3,000 once we started coming down the mountain. And you better start getting down quick, especially if you can't come into this. You won't get down low enough if you want to come in from this way. So your best bet is to come in that way, and you can try the ILS approach. Maybe it'll work better for you than it did for me. Okay, so let's look at, there's the hospital, which looks like a hospital. And then there's that waterfall. And look at this. They got all kinds of little waterfalls. I bet that would be an incredible walk up there. Look at that. Every one of these little ridges has a waterfall on it. That's got to be just beautiful. Just beautiful. I can't figure out why the heck they would make that thing a POI. Or this next one, for that matter. So here's the other one. I didn't even put a bookmark on it. That's the astronomy center right there. And that's not an observatory dome there. That's just an architectural feature. But you can go there if you want to save your trip up to the top of the mountain. And then we came in for our approach. That's it. Awesome flight. Learned all kinds of cool stuff. Every time I take one of these, even if I think I'm familiar with the area, always something to learn. Always love having you guys along. Had an absolute blast, just like every single flight. Stay tuned for that Christmas flight. That should be cool. We'll get to see the Northern Lights, hopefully, if that one works. Can't wait to see y'all again in the skies. Later.